as long as Iran's got control of the leverage, the global economy is going to be dependent on that. Because before the war, just as a quick reminder, because it's fundamental, the Strait of Hormuz was open to vessels from all countries. There were no fees, there were no tolls. It was under the UN Convention on Law of the Seas. Now, when the Trump folks miscalculate, because they never planned for this, I mean, absolute muppets, because any decent analyst knew this might happen.
My guest is Professor Scott Lucas, a highly experienced and globally renowned expert in American politics, US and British foreign policy, and a wide range of international affairs.
At one point, the good Iranians, I can make a deal with them. Now it's back to, oh, they're scum. Oh, I'm going to blast them to smithereens. Oh, they're trying to kill me. Oh, this is terrible. Hey, dude, you killed their supreme leader. Do you think they're not going to want to kill you?
With specific focus on the Middle East, Iran, Europe, and Asia. He also has expertise in the new media, intelligence services, and propaganda.
What if the Houthis were up talking to the Iranians about finally moving to close the Bab el-Mandab Strait? Again, a point of leverage that is there that has not yet been exercised.
The Strait of Hormuz situation is already an economic catastrophe. This is just the final nail in the coffin.
He has also been an active journalist since 1979 and is the founder and editor-in-chief of EA Worldview, a prominent news site that provides daily news and analysis of global affairs.
So what I tell you is reliably, this is what I know. Thousands killed, could be in the tens of thousands, could be, because we don't have IDs on everybody. So where are they now? What happened now? Look.
The UK Parliament is pushing legal measures that would literally and directly fight against the existence of independent journalists, independent media outlets like retortmedia.com and indeed this podcast. If these measures do successfully go through Parliament, we are at a much higher risk than ever before to be shut down and even blocked from YouTube, TikTok, and all social media. That's why I need your support. Please make sure you subscribe on retortmedia.com/support. Provide us with whatever financial support you can. You can become a member, or you can donate anything from $1 to $10,000 if you want. It's entirely up to you. But this is the only way we can stay connected together, because Retort Media is not hosted in the UK or in the United States, but in Europe. So we are protected in there. And the only way we can continue and for us to stay connected is for you to subscribe on retortmedia.com/support. Please do that as soon as you possibly can. And I appreciate your support. Now let's get back to the episode. Scott, welcome to our bi-weekly geopolitical review. So much has happened, as always, but I think we should start, of course, with Iran, although that wasn't the plan, as you and I just talked about before we recorded. But we can't not talk about Iran because, here we are again. We seem to have been dragged back to square one. People care more about, of course, Iran because of the bills, etc. The markets are all over the place right now. So what's happening with Iran?
In a weird way, with all this kind of like craziness that goes on, which is it a war? Are there still negotiations going on? Who exactly is attacking who and why? I have actually got a pretty good handle on this, because with situations like this, you just want a fundamental issue or a fundamental, basically, point of conflict that's at the heart of it. And here it's the Strait of Hormuz. This just, right, if you just imagine this, right, and that is Iran has control of the Strait of Hormuz, which is that vital waterway, 25% of maritime oil and gas go through there. Iran took control of that the first week of March, within a few days of the U.S.-Israel war. So Iran's got the control, they've got the leverage. As long as Iran's got control of the leverage, the global economy is going to be dependent on that. Because before the war, just as a quick reminder, because it's fundamental, the Strait of Hormuz was open to vessels from all countries. There were no fees, there were no tolls. It was under the UN Convention on Law of the Seas. Now, when the Trump folks miscalculate, because they never planned for this, absolute muppets, because any decent analyst knew this might happen. But Iran gets control of the strait. three and a half weeks ago, whenever Trump signed off on the Memorandum of Understanding, a few days before he officially signed it in France, when he said, I digitally signed the Memorandum of Understanding, and when he did not consult his advisors about it, he entered into discussions based on Iranian terms. Clause 5 of the Memorandum of Understanding says that Iran will oversee the waterway and will not charge tolls or fees for 60 days because you're going to negotiate the final status, right? But the key part here is it's Iran that is recognized in the memorandum as being the controlling authority. So Trump has handed the initiative to the Iranians, and I said that at the time. Well, clearly Trump's own officials have realized this, and they're like, we don't want the Iranians to be the controlling authority. What are we going to do about this? So what they've been doing, and if you track it, Marco Rubio, a few weeks ago, goes out to the Gulf, and he talks to a number of Gulf states, not the Saudis, because the Saudis and the Americans were pissed off with each other, but he talks to the Omanis. And what they're talking about is, look, should there be a route through the Strait of Hormuz, which is controlled by the Omanis? What you might call the southern route through the Strait of Hormuz, and the Iranians have the northern route. And what has happened in practice is that there are vessels that are using that route, and they're not asking the Iranians for permission. When the Iranians know this is happening, they will fire on those vessels. And this has been happening for weeks. And what happens usually it's about 24, 48 hours. This time it's lasted longer. It's now going into I think it's going to be at least 3 days now. In fact, we may be going into our fourth night of attacks, because what happens is the Iranians attack vessels. They attack 3 more since last night. Then the Americans fire on Iranian missile and drone sites and other positions. And in fact, in this case, they've gone farther. They've hit some non-military sites as well. Then the Iranians retaliate by firing on Gulf states. So you get this cycle of violence that develops. And then you wonder, okay, will everybody then take a step back, and we'll get back to the mediators, Qatar and Pakistan, then saying, and behind Pakistan is Saudi Arabia, and then say, okay, can we get everybody back to talk? Well, we're not back to that phase of can we get them back to talk at this point. And that's why everybody's getting particularly shaky here. So just excuse me. I know, look, you'll put up with me in terms of what I'm going to do. I'm actually going to look at the current Brent crude oil price right now, because this is the global price, the oil benchmark. Now, it got as low as just over $70 on July the 7th. Now, that would have been a week ago, because everybody thought we might be getting a deal, right? Well, lo and behold, we don't wind up getting a deal, and we wind up getting these attacks instead. Brent went up 11% in price within 24 hours. So it wound up going up to around about $85. It may have even touched on about $86, $87 per barrel. Now, I'm going to hasten to add, in the first days of the war, oil really spiked, and it was around the $100 to $110 mark, and it even went close to 120 at one point. So we're not back to that level yet. But if this limbo continues, and this is the best way of thinking about it, this limbo where we don't have a war, but we got attacks, so therefore we don't have negotiations, clear path to negotiations. If this limbo continues, that uncertainty of the global economy continues. And I think you're giving me a lead here by saying, well, what about gasoline prices? Because you bring that back to the United States. And it's like, how long can the Trump folks live with that in a midterm congressional election year? And the rule of thumb that I think a lot of people are looking at is that it's sort of an informal, like, it's almost like a political tradition, that the real campaigning begins after Labor Day. That's the first Monday in September. So if the Trump folks have not gotten out of this limbo by the first Monday in September, if this is an election which is not manipulated, big if, then the Trump folks are they got problems. They got real problems because people are going to be ticked off about this. And Trump just makes it worse because what he's doing is, we talked before, the crying wolf thing, and they're like, oh, okay, here comes. So we got Trump. Oh, at one point, the good Iranians, I can make a deal with them. Now it's back to, oh, they're scum. Oh, I'm going to blast them to smithereens. Oh, they're trying to kill me. Oh, this is terrible. Hey, dude, you killed their supreme leader. Do you think they're not going to want to kill you? Reality check. But then,
and is that the reason though? That's the thing, because like last time when you and I had a chat, basically there were skirmishes, right? Effectively, it didn't escalate to the current situation. And to me, it feels like as if it's all sudden. Is it that? Is it because Israel, apparently, the intelligence of Israel, Mossad, told the Trump administration that they're seeing evidence that the Iranians want to assassinate him? Is that the trigger?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, there's separate stories here. The Strait of Hormuz story, right. You don't need the Israelis there. I mean, the problem here is that the U.S. got itself into a bind over that waterway. To get out of that bind, you either have to go into talks with the Iranians, or somehow you've got to defy the Iranians working with the Gulf states. Now, there's a couple of problems here. One is the Iranians aren't going to roll over and accept that. And two, the Gulf states aren't happy with you. I mean, they just are not happy. And it's not a guarantee that they're going to say like, okay, we'll just do whatever Trump wants at this point. But let's get back. Then what you got almost what's a side story, which is the Iranians have a week-long funeral ceremony for the late supreme leader. Although he was killed on February 28th, they didn't bury him till last week. And they get millions of people turning out. And I know we're going to get comments on us and say, oh, how can you say it was millions? Oh, it was like, it's only thousands or tens of thousands.
Videos.
Watch the videos, man.
These people watch the videos, mate. You
watch the videos. And
how many they are.
and you look at, because it wasn't just in Tehran, which big city. It was also other cities. It was Mashhad. It was Qom. And of course, he had big turnouts in Iraq as well. But what I tell people here is, remember, a lot of people that were turning out were not turning out for the supreme leader. They were turning out for the nation. You've killed the leader of the nation. So you might hate that leader. You might want a change in the leadership, right? Which is what a lot of Iranians wanted back in January when they were protesting. But you still don't like it when another country kills your leader. That's not someone else's job to come in and do it. But anyway, the Israelis decide to put the wind up Trump. You absolutely pegged it, which is the Israelis put the wind up Trump by doing this. The Israelis say, "Oh, we can kill the next supreme leader." So they wag their finger at the Iranians. We're still watching you. We could kill the supreme leader, and the Iranians are like, "Yeah, whatever." But clearly, what happened is that in some of these marches, with the Israelis winding everything up, we could kill the next leader. You get these Iranians that say like 100 million, and they've got like a big, like it's almost like one of those giant posters where people are holding up various cards for it, which is like $100 million bounty for Trump's head. And I suspect that's what got to him. It's like this big sign going, this is how, and he's probably pissed off. He's not only worth 100 million. He's probably upset that they didn't put like $1 billion bounty on it. Yeah, probably. And so that's when he flies off the handle and says, but the other thing is he's a bully, and he's a bully that doesn't know what he's going to do. And so that's when he gives it all that. Oh, I'm going to hit you and your brother and your mother. And it's like, yeah. And the Iranians now are like, what else are you going to do to us? You killed our supreme leader. You killed our commanders. You killed our officers. What, is there something else beyond that? Yeah. And civilians. Oh yeah. Don't forget the civilians. Although with the regime, civilians can be expendable for the regime. I'm not a huge fan. So where we are is just this cycle of white noise. And I'm actually at the point, I'll tell you this, because I kind of say it in my interviews. Every time someone starts an interview with it, just, well, Donald Trump said, blah, blah, blah. And I say, well, don't start your question with Donald Trump said. Start your question with something which is the reality of the situation, rather than what he's going out there and spouting off the top of his head. beyond the fact he doesn't really know what's happening. And just a quick reminder, which is the Israelis. The Israelis bumped him into attacking Iran on February 28th. And the way they bumped him into it, the Americans might have done it anyway, but the Israelis went and told the Americans, oh yeah, if you go in, you attack, you kill the supreme leader, the Iranians will rise up. The Iranians will rise up, and they'll rise up, and they'll overthrow the regime, and that'll be it. There'll be flowers in the streets, and it'll be like a capitalist heaven. And the Trump folks didn't bother to check the Israeli intel. And by the way, there's been a twist in that story. You want a little bit of bonus here? Because almost nobody noticed this. And it was New York Times. Credit to them for getting the story. U.S. officials go and tell the New York Times, oh, the Israelis had, they were grooming someone to take over. You want to have a guess who they were grooming to take over as the leader of Iran? This is such an irony. If this is true, if the Israelis aren't just making shit up, which they're doing. The U.S. officials said, and I suspect they would have had to get it from the Israelis, that since 2024, the Israelis have been grooming, working with the former president, Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, to take over. Right? Now, quick reminder, Ahmadinejad, who was president from 2005 to 2013, who only stayed in power in 2009 because that election was rigged after the fact. Ahmadinejad's the guy who said we have to wipe Israel off the face of the map, right?
Exactly.
Now here we are, like, getting on to 20 years later, and the Israelis are like, this will be our guy. Ahmadinejad, according to the U.S. officials, who either they have their own intel and they're dobbing the Israelis in, or the Israelis were like, we don't care, you can tell people now. The Israelis met Ahmadinejad in Budapest, in Hungary, right? And on one occasion, he met the head of Mossad. That's the story that's out there. Now, I will tell you, there at least are some people in Iran that think that's plausible, because Ahmadinejad's movements have been restricted during this war. He was allowed to come out of his box and appear at the funeral of the supreme leader, but there were guards around him. And I'm not sure that was for his protection. I think it's more like, we're watching you, boyo. And he was masked, actually. The guards were there around him. They were masked, and just like keeping an eye. And the story is he's under house arrest now, because of all of this. So there's all kinds of hijinks that are still going on with the Israelis, but I emphasize this is still around the fundamental issue. And I have to emphasize, I'm not watching the Israelis as much as I am watching the Gulf states, because in particular, Oman is caught between the Iranians and the Americans as to which way they jump. And right now they're trying not to jump. They're trying just to straddle both lines. And the Saudis are like, okay, we're going to keep an eye on this and see which way it breaks, and then we'll make our decision. Saudis are playing both sides right now. Saudis are behind the Pakistan mediators in terms of trying to get negotiations. But then the Saudis are thinking, all right, if the Americans are going to go back and have a crack at the Iranians, they need to have a serious crack at the Iranians and get rid of the regime. So the Saudis are like, okay, and the problem for the Saudis is it's not breaking either way right now. And so there you go. And 2 weeks from now, I'm going to make a prediction. I bet you and I are talking about the same damn thing.
Again, exactly.
Again, it's going to like Groundhog's Day, right? It's just, I'm not going to be able to give you anything new at this point. I don't. And so it's a limbo, and I just can't tell you. It's frustrating as an analyst, but you have to be honest with you. I don't know if it lasts days, if it lasts weeks, or heaven help us, I don't think it'll last months. Again, because of the domestic pressure in the United States, but you can't rule it out.
But of course, the other issue as well, that Trump can't appear to be the loser in here. I mean, he's not going to allow it. I mean, I think you and I know very well that he would rather the American economy to collapse for him to be seen as a loser. No,
he could do it in one condition. This is weird. This is Trump. So remember this. He was the guy who wound up hugging Kim Jong-un as like his new bestie, right? Now, and that was only about a year after Fire and Fury, right? We're going to blow up North Korea. little rocket man, you get why it's coming to you. But once he thought, oh, I got a photo op with Kim where we appear to be bringing global peace, then he's like onto it, right? And remember, this is a guy who I'm old enough to remember him declaring himself the president of the Board of Peace, which happened 2 weeks before the start of the war. It was only 2 weeks before the start of the war. So if he had the idea that the Iranians were willing to strike a deal and to give him credit for the deal, I think he would do it. And he'd have a lot of explaining to do to a lot of Republicans who are like, what did you give up to get that deal? And indeed, I think that's probably the problem. I think when Trump, and again, it would be last month, I'd have to walk back how many weeks it is now, but I think you're talking middle of last month. I remind you, when he signed the Memorandum of Understanding, he signed a draft document. He did not consult anybody. Now, why would he do that? Because he thinks, first of all, he's got a vice president, J.D. Vance, who wants that, right? So he's got a split administration. But why does he side with Vance, or he goes along parallel to Vance? Because he thinks, I can get real credit for this, okay? Now, remember, the next thing is, where does he sign the formal document? He then goes to the G7 summit. Vance is supposed to go to Switzerland and sign the document formally on Friday.
Yes.
And I'm betting Trump thinks, I don't want Vance to get credit for this. I want the credit. I'm going to sign this on Wednesday night after the G7 summit when Emmanuel Macron is fluffing me with this banquet in the Palace of Versailles. And so Trump's thinking, I've got the photos taken of me. Look at this Palace of Versailles. Look, I got Uncle JD never went to Switzerland. The Iranians stood him up, right? What the Iranians had done is they had played Trump, and they had played Trump's ego to get that possibility that he was going to get the signature. But why does it all fall apart? It falls apart because, unlike with North Korea, because North Korea was all show, there was no substance whatsoever out of North Korea in the end. Nothing actually happened with North Korea. If you look at it here, something has to happen. You can't just sign a memorandum of understanding and then pose for the cameras. You have got to have something happen. And I come back to it. What was the number one issue in the Memorandum of Understanding? It was the Strait of Hormuz. Okay. Now you can say we've reopened the Strait of Hormuz, but the Iranians are setting the condition under our management. Okay. So that's the first thing. How do you spend that as a win if you're Trump? And it's like, Trump probably don't care, but there are other Republicans who do. Because remember the whole shtick. Trump ripped up the 2018 nuclear deal, ripped it up. Okay. So point one, the Iranians get Strait of Hormuz. Point two, in addition to getting control of the Strait of Hormuz, they get the lifting of American sanctions.
Yes.
Not even Obama did that in 2015. Yeah. That was a staggered process to lift sanctions. Three, they get the unfreezing of billions of dollars of Iranian assets, and the number flying around is 24 billion, right? Mm. When Donnie and his boys kept talking about the pallets of cash to Iran, which is a joke and a half of a story, I can explain that to you sometime. I think it was about $1.5 billion, right? Mm. Here, 24 billion. And at least the Americans are giving it this, that there's going to be a private investment and reconstruction fund. They're not going to fund it. The Gulf states will, but up to 300 billion. So look at that. Now you're going to go back to the same people, some of whom were in Washington in 2018, when you said that Obama had given the Iranians money and hadn't gotten anything for it. Oh, and you're going back to those people, and the priority has not been Iran's nuclear program, which it supposedly was. And you're going to go back. And so what happens here is that the pressure is on the Trump folks not to complete the deal. And Uncle JD wanted it. He really wants that deal for his political ambitions, but he couldn't swing it, which is where, do you remember 2 weeks ago, Uncle JD was everywhere? He was like flogging that damn book of his, and he was trashing the Pope and all that. Where's JD this week? where the hell is JD? I'm serious. It's like
He's been hidden
when
for a
JD
while, hasn't he?
when he thought he can't get, all of a sudden he can't get the deal with Iran, and he just disappears like Homer Simpson back into the hedge. Right?
Yes.
And it's like, okay, dude, and so I'm waiting for the twist, but the Iranians aren't going to concede. Why would the Iranians concede here? Seriously, why would they concede?
Well, they're gaining. They're gaining everything, aren't they? They're gaining.
Yeah, they're gaining. Why would they? Yeah,
yeah.
They're in the strong position. They've got, the only way that the Trump folks get out of this is if they can run hundreds of vessels out of the Strait of Hormuz. Hundreds of vessels, right? Because there's hundreds that are trapped. Do you know how many vessels crossed the Strait of Hormuz on Sunday? 14. And
wow,
all but one of those 14 had Iranian permission.
Wow.
Now, some vessels may have gone dark and gotten out. But of course, if the Iranians catch you going dark and trying to cross the strait, that's when they start firing. And then we start the whole damn cycle again. So no. And again, for all the monkeying around that Israel talks about, Israel's focus right now is Lebanon and their election.
Yes.
So we're not in the same position back in February where the Israelis are going, the Iranians will rise up, regime change. The Israelis know that ain't going to happen now. So why not concentrate on Lebanon? And if you're a politician, you concentrate on trying to, and there's no guarantees Netanyahu holds on to his majority this time. Absolutely not.
Yeah, I've heard that from insiders within Israel.
Yeah.
They feel that his political career is doomed, and that's including even people that supported him before. Apparently, they feel that he dragged Israel into a major quagmire right now. Like even now, they're realizing they're, as a country, they're in a very they're totally isolated globally.
That's it. And see, the challenge Netanyahu is not coming from the left. I mean, the Israeli left's been marginalized for many years. It's coming from other right wingers. So I think it's Gabi Eisenkote's party, which has challenged him. And then you've got another party, former ministers, Naftali Bennett, is involved in it. And I should say Yair Lapid, who's in the center. Yes. So you've got a right-center coalition party as well. And they're all trying to sort of box in Netanyahu, because first of all, Gaza did not end. Gaza is an ongoing issue, and the Israelis know, man. Still, where's your closure on those 1,200 who got killed on October 7th? Where's your closure on that? And he still gets the blame for that. And I think the other thing is he spun out this bribery trial for months, trying to avoid it. And the Israelis are really interesting. Is that they will take their leaders to court. And Ehud Olmert got banged away in prison on bribery charges. So Netanyahu can't do what Trump does and just go away, leave me alone. So politically it could be. But anyway, that may be a topic for a later pod.
But the one thing, obviously, we mentioned briefly, the Iranian people that went to protest, which basically Trump wanted to save and become the hero, etc. Do you have any insider information as to what happened to these people? Because the media in here aren't talking about these people at all. I mean, because I've seen reports, and I'm not sure if they're accurate in terms of they had hundreds upon hundreds of arrests. Many of them have been killed or executed, I should say. I mean, what is happening with the Iranian people?
Okay, so again, you remember I taught in Iran before 2009. After 2009, got the message, you want to come back? Fine, but we got a prison cell waiting for you. So I passed on that one. Still, though, however, from that experience and from working with Iranians outside of Iran who have gone back, I've got whole networks of friends and contacts there. One of my former students, Deepa Parent, who's an incredible journalist, she's freelance, but she's effectively the best person on Iran for The Guardian, right? And because again, her network inside Iran is just extensive. So I think I sort of gave you a hint of it earlier, and that is, they hit the streets in January. It started off with economic grievances, but you've had these long-standing political grievances, the quest for rights, for reforms, maybe even a change of regime that go all the way back actually to the late 1990s, to the university protest, but definitely to 2009, which was the protest over the rigged election, the manipulated election. The leader of the Green movement, who probably led the first round ballot, but then they had to make sure that you didn't go to a second round. Mir Hossein Mousavi, he's still under house arrest. He's been under house arrest since February 2011, right? So people still got grievances here. Minimum, the best tally we've got, and I mean by people who actually documented, could find confirmation, names, ages, just like, biographical information is 7,000 to 8,000 were killed. And most of them in a 2-day period, January 8th to January 9th, where the supreme leader, the one who is now dead, and this is why I shed no tears, where he effectively told the security services, we're losing control here. That's it. Any means necessary. And they just go out and unleash hell on the streets. So you've got to be careful here, because there's, starting with the Saudi outlet, Iran International, and because it's a Saudi outlet, there are others who will put the figure around that more than 30,000 were killed, right? And Donald Trump is now saying 52,000. If you watch Trump, he keeps changing the number. It was 32, then it was 42,000. Now he's up to 52,000. It might be up to 1,052,000 before the war ends. So what I tell you is reliably, this is what I know. Thousands killed, could be in the tens of thousands, could be, because we don't have IDs on everybody. So where are they now? What happened now? Look, I said this on February 28th, and I'll sell it to you again. When they killed the supreme leader, they killed the officers of the community. Those people who wanted a different Iran, you put them in an impossible position. Because if they come out and they ask for that different Iran now, the regime's going to say, you're puppets of the Americans and the Israelis.
Exactly. Yeah.
Because it's a wartime situation. And because it's a wartime situation and the security forces are mobilized, they're going to knock the hell out of you again, right? Because you're effectively talking about what is martial law that takes place. So they don't come out. And I absolutely understand why my friends didn't come out and why others did not come out and hit the streets. And it gets worse because the Israelis, and it becomes known, like the Israelis were like, they go to the Americans, okay, the January protest, I need to break, a big center of those protests was in Iranian Kurdistan. The Kurds who have been marginalized, who have faced discrimination for many, many years. They were at the center of the protest. Well, some of those Kurds, Iranian Kurds, are in exile. They're in Iraq. And the Israelis are like, and they tell the Americans this, we'll give them arms and they'll cross the border and then they'll stimulate this uprising that we're talking about. Well, all you have done there is you have just justified every regime narrative going back to the late 90s that anytime there's a protest, it's not a real protest. It's the Israelis or the Americans who are behind it. So no, everybody comes out. And then Iran is the narrative since 1979, is Islamic Republic. But the Iranian regime, in times of trouble, don't just present themselves as Islamic Republic. They then will allow that space to talk about Iranian nationalism. And that's what's happened during this war. You're not just defending Islam or the Islamic Republic. You're defending the nation. Right? Yeah. And I could just tell you, that if Britain was attacked today and someone came in, massive bombing of Britain, whoever it was, and if they killed, let's say they kill Andy Burnham if he becomes prime minister, are you going to tell me that British conservatives are going to say, oh, good, we're glad Andy Burnham's dead and you've attacked our country? Even I think some reform types might say that's a bit too far. Yeah. And are going to come out for the nation that takes place. And I'll just give you the stinger and the takeaway line. So for me, Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu saved the Iranian regime. This is the horrible irony of what took place.
Yeah.
They killed the leader of the regime, but then they saved the regime as a structure. Because what they did is they eventually put the regime in a stronger political position because of the Strait, because of the ability to retaliate against the Gulf, and because they survived. So they put them in a stronger political position with better terms than they could have gotten before February 28th. And that means they're in a better political position at home because they don't look like losers. They look like survivors, right?
And if they get all that money as well, and they choose to invest it, I mean, we'll see what happens. But basically, they'll do what China is doing, isn't it? Invest in infrastructure, etc. And people will be like, you know what, this is amazing. Thank you so much, our dear leaders.
Yeah, let's just run another parallel that's even closer. Hey, can you tell me those people who were protesting against the Maduro government in Venezuela? What's happening with them now? Have they succeeded in getting the government that they wanted for change and for reforms? Did they get that? Hell no. The Maduro regime's still in power. It's just under a different person as president, right? And the Americans are absolutely fine with that, right? So, and again, I'll repeat it to you. Uncle JD, when there was that period, it looked like we might get negotiations on the memorandum. Uncle JD is going, yeah, we can deal with these Iranians. We can deal with these guys now. Yeah. Right. It was not like they have to go and whatever. You know, Trump's that was that idea. And this could well flip, that if it comes back to the Americans have to make a deal, they're not going to support regime change. They're not going to support what the protesters were calling for in January. And you're absolutely right that a regime that was in economic trouble in January is going to get billions of dollars to try to bail itself out.
So is this memorandum of understanding will still basically carry on? So despite the current escalation,
it's in limbo. It's in limbo. The document is still there, right? The document is still there.
But it's not legally binding, though, is it? Is it legally binding?
No, it's just a memo. It's just a memo. It's like the agenda for the deal, right?
Yeah.
But it's a 14-point agenda, which is largely an Iranian agenda. You're supposed to have, you know, and if you were going to be technical about it, it's like the memorandum provides for a 60-day window for negotiation, right? So that 60-day window for negotiation, I'm pretty sure, remember, expires on August the 21st. And so the question is, on August the 21st, what happens at that point? Do you extend the window for negotiation, or do you then say, bish, bash, bosh, right? Now, some people got the flutter a few days ago because Donald Trump said, the ceasefire is over. But then, remember, never lead with what Donald Trump said. But then in the very next sentence, he said, oh, but Jared, his son-in-law, Jared's still negotiating, and Steve Witkoff, real estate developer, they're still negotiating, so they're still talking. So it's like, ceasefire's over, but they're still talking. The position we're at right now is that, you know, there still will be channels of messages being passed between Iran and the United States through the mediators. That's still going on. But the actually acting on those messages at this point, there's a lot less movement now. And the Pakistanis have sounded very frustrated in the past few days. I think we can effectively say that we're at a standstill. But we can't say that it's dead, that the process is completely done.
Well, I've seen also rumors that apparently there are discussions within the Gulf states where they just want to basically create some kind of a new route to bypass the Strait of Hormuz altogether. It's not a rumor necessarily, but there's nothing official. There's not an official statement, basically, but there's definitely a lot of plans, and there's a lot of money being thought about, because let's face it, the Saudis, the Emiratis, whatever, they're actually running out of cash because they've invested shitloads of money on AI. Oh. They're not making any money out of that. And of course, the current situation with Strait of Hormuz, of course, that's kind of made it even worse. So it's not like they are flush with cash as they used to be, you know, before the war. But they're certainly now, it seems that the Gulf states, they are frustrated, and they think, you know what, screw all of you, screw America, screw Iran. Let's figure out our own route.
Well, there was already a route. There's already a route that is being used. There's not a complete cutoff because the Saudis, for example, have got pipelines, land-based pipelines that move out. But, well, I'll give you the twist on that in just a minute, right? So you've got pipelines that don't lead up into the strait. The other thing is that what they're talking about is new pipelines, possibly, but they're also talking about, remember that the Strait of Hormuz is up on the northern coast of the Arabian Peninsula. You work your way down to around towards the eastern coast of the peninsula, right? After you've come out of the strait, and you could conceivably develop port facilities there. That would be the whole question. But that's a project that's going to take years. So the question here is, can you expand the existing pipelines? Now, here's the twist. And almost no one, I love it when there's a story that comes and goes and everybody doesn't pick up on it. Yesterday, so we're recording on a Tuesday. So on the Monday, the weird story. So let me just narrate it for you. The Houthis sent a delegation to Iran for the funeral of the supreme leader. Okay. Now, the Houthis are the insurgents who control most of Yemen. They are up there in Tehran, and the Iranian airliner is going to bring them back. The Iranian plane is going to bring them back. Officially, the story is the governing council bombs the runway in the Yemeni capital, Sana'a. That governing council is backed by the Saudis, so you can pretty much know it was the Saudis who bombed the runway. Okay? Now, why are the Saudis bombing the runway? Well, the Houthis, during the war on Gaza, threatened to close the Bab el-Mandab Strait, which is in the Red Sea.
Yes.
Not up towards the Persian Gulf, in the Red Sea. At one point, shipping was down 80% through that strait. What if the Houthis were up talking to the Iranians about finally moving to close the Bab el-Mandab Strait? Again, a point of leverage that is there that has not yet been exercised. What if the Saudis were upset that the Houthis might have been talking about that, and therefore they bombed the runway to show their displeasure about all of that, right? So that is on top of this, that you have a story which is not just about the Strait of Hormuz. You perhaps now, so far the Houthis, because they lost quite a few of their leaders when the Israelis hit them during the war in Gaza. Yeah. The Houthis haven't dared to make this move yet, but if we get this limbo,
if it just spirals into that,
spirals, then you can't rule it out.
I mean, that will be, I mean, the Strait of Hormuz situation is already an economic catastrophe. This is just the final nail in the coffin. And for the listeners who might not be aware, who are not necessarily good with geography, you know, I ask you to remember that point. Was it a couple of years ago, Scott, when one ship was stuck in the Suez? In the Suez Canal.
Blocked the whole canal.
And it blocked the whole canal, and the markets completely lost it, right? One ship.
Yeah.
Well, this is basically the channel before, sort of, you know, at the south of the Red Sea. That's the channel before all the ships reach to the Suez. So basically, if that is shut, this is not one ship being stuck. That's multiple ships.
Well,
that would be a complete disaster.
Yeah.
Obviously, they know that.
Let me just check something real quick on the phone, because I'm just double checking. What you got is, remember, you're trying to move super tankers through here.
Yes.
Big ships. When these straits narrow down, there's not like this a wide channel they're moving through.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, first of all, it makes them easier targets if you want to hit them. Secondly, it's very hard. It takes a long time to maneuver a supertanker and try to turn a supertanker around. So these are choke points. And if you get both choke points being hit at the same time, good luck. Good luck, you know, with the global economy if that takes place. Should we move on to something more like optimistic and enlightening, like the state of the UK at this point?
Well, I was thinking. Well, first, I just tell the listeners, brace yourselves, ladies and gentlemen, because I'm sorry to say that it's not looking good, regardless of what happens right now. It's this limbo is going to cost us even more. And again, we see that in the markets, and of course, I talk a lot about AI. The AI bubble is closer and closer to explosion. Of course, SpaceX potentially could be the instigator of that, because the stock price of SpaceX is complete down the shitter this time. Just like it's so, at the time of this recording, it's $140 per share, which is below of what they started, and it's been like that now for the past few days, below the starting price. And it's that could be one of the indicators that the AI bubble is blowing up closer to reality, unfortunately. And it's not looking good, guys. Which, I mean, we won't go back to the UK, but it's relevant to this question, because of course the Republicans have been livid with Trump with this potential new agreement. Like you said, he kind of signed it off. Trump signed it off unilaterally, took the Republicans off guard a little bit. But of course, there are some Republicans, very, very powerful voices within the Republican Party, such as Lindsey Graham, that was the peacemaker, if you like, between Trump and these Republicans. But of course, sadly, he died. Yeah. And there's a lot of questions about that. I'm seeing conspiracy theories that the Russians poisoned him potentially when he was in Ukraine.
No.
I don't know any of that stuff. I mean, I think it's you got to be very careful with that. But I think, unless there's anything interesting in relation to Lindsey Graham, I'm actually more interested in the consequences of his death, because, as I just said, he was the key peacemaker between the Republicans, who are basically getting frustrated with Trump and Trump administration. What happens now?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely, that's been the thing that's interested me in terms of the consequences of this, in terms of the battle for the Republican Party between the Trumpists and whether you call them the old school or the establishment Republicans.
Yes.
First of all, guys, sometimes, don't go conspiracy theory. The cause of death for Graham is that his aorta went, right? And that can happen, and a guy who's 71 years old, and, Lindsey, he wasn't the fittest of people, right? And he had a very demanding schedule and all this. So, we don't need to go down the road.
No, and also there's also family history. I think his father died from the same condition as well, and some other family members. So it's obviously a genetic, hereditary problem.
It's a risk, and so. But when Lindsey goes, the key thing for me is that, okay, he's a protege of John McCain, and the late Senator John McCain's about as establishment Republican as you can get. War veteran hero, runs for president in 2008, fiscal conservative. A man who will stand on principles. I disagree with McCain on a lot of issues. But, those of you who remember the fact that he was the one who saved Obamacare in 2017 by casting the deciding vote when he was terminally ill. So he comes comes from the hospital to cast the thumbs down vote to block Trump. Graham, in 2016, had been humiliated by Trump. As a lot of the Republican candidates were that year, because of course Trump is, sneering at him, he's belittling him, insulting him, gives out Graham's phone number at a public forum. Yeah. I can't remember if he did it on social media or in a public appearance, but he gave out the phone number. And yet, despite all of that, the way that Lindsey positions it is he positions this like, okay, I'm going to be like Trump's buddy here, right? Now, the establishment Republicans were effectively codependent with Trump in that first term. And Mitch McConnell is a great example of it, because McConnell, as the Senate Majority Leader, thought he could maneuver Trump into getting his agenda across. Mm-hmm. And that included packing the courts with conservative judges and getting the big tax cut bill, which they got at the end of 2017. What McConnell hadn't banked on was the chaos that Trump brought, right? The complete chaos. And I think Lindsey hadn't banked on it either. But Lindsey's either in a position where I'm Trump's buddy, I'm the guy that golfs with him and so on. Lindsey either has to roll back on that, or he has to double down. And he decided to double down. Now, Graham's still a political maneuver, so that he's not like he's completely like sneering at the establishment like a lot of the House Trumpists are. But it always put Graham in the position of carrying water for Trump. And that meant that when Trump started going after the establishment big time, which he did from the start of term 2, which is because Trump's second term has basically been a retribution term. And if you voted for impeachment, or if you voted to convict me on impeachment charges, I'm writing this portion of the book up right now, I'm going to get you. And the stories of what he did to Liz Cheney, for example, Adam Kinzinger in the House. But then he's been doing it to Republican senators like Bill Cassidy, the physician from Louisiana. He finally got Bill Cassidy out by primarying him this year around. John Cornyn in Texas, who was the number 3 of the Senate, he primaried him as well. I don't think Lindsey was ever in any danger of being primaried. At least I think he probably could have kept his seat, but Lindsey still wants to protect his political career. So what you get is, and I think there's a couple of episodes that stand out with Graham, because I think Graham stands as a microcosm for the Republican Party for what's happened to him. Back in January 21, Mitch McConnell had come out when he saved Trump's backside again. And again, McConnell, I swear to God, he is a really shrewd politician and could be an effective operator. But why he does this, it's like you're miscalculating it. He whips the Republicans not to convict. And at least, and this is over the Capitol attack and trying to overturn the election. And in the end, I think there were only 7 Republicans that defied and that voted to convict Trump. McConnell says, okay, it wasn't right to convict him here. This isn't the place to do it, but the courts can deal with that. Something which, by the way, Trump never forgave McConnell for. And of course, Trump survives the courts. That's how he gets back into the presidency in 24. Well, at the same time, that story is pretty well known. A lot of people have forgotten the Graham story. Graham said it, I think it may have been I can't remember if it was hours or a couple of days after January the 6th. He said, that's it. I'm done with him. Enough is enough. Lo and behold, a few weeks later, Lindsey pops up. Lindsey's doing the Sunday morning talk shows and going, Trump's the future of the Republican Party. And he did the same thing in 2022. Again. And his reward by that. And what I'm saying is, after he said in 2022, we have to ride with Trump. He's the future of the Republican Party. A few weeks after that, Trump, shooting his mouth off, says, I'm going to pardon everyone who's involved in January the 6th. And Lindsey says, I have doubts about that. I don't think we should pardon everybody. Trump, guess what happens then? Trump trashes Graham, trashes it. He's a Republican in name only. He doesn't have, he doesn't stand up, right? You can't count on him. Does that mean that Graham finally realizes, look, I've carried water for this guy, but in the end, he's going to turn on me? Absolutely not. Graham comes back and does the same thing again and again and again. And it's it becomes like a bad version of we're not supposed to mention Gary Glitter and understand why, but still, it becomes a bad version of the Gary Glitter song, If You Want to Be in My Gang, right? And Graham, in the end, decides he wants to be in Trump's gang. And that's now, why do I tell you that story in terms of the Republican Party? This past couple of weeks, the combination of McConnell's disappearance and the death of Graham, you got Trumpists who are trying to seize on that moment. They already have control of the Republican Party in the House. They now want it in the Senate. The current speaker of the current Senate Majority Leader, John Thune, is not a Trumpist. He's more old school, right? They would love to get rid of John Thune, right? They'd love to put one of their own in there. But right now what they're going to try to do is they're just going to try to box him in. They're hoping to get more of their people elected in November because they primaried people like Cassidy and Cornyn and just close in on him. And what's been interesting is that right now Lindsey's seat is his sister has been appointed to fill the seat. And then the election will come up in November and we'll see if she stands. I suspect she will stand for the seat, or to avoid this Trumpist versus Republican dogfight in terms of who stands up there. The Mitch McConnell story is interesting because, of course, the latest development is a proof of life photo came out to show, and everybody, is it real? Is it AI? Now, I don't know. I honestly cannot tell you at this point whether it's real or AI. But what's interesting to me is that the Republicans who came out and said it's AI were the Trumpists.
Oh, wow.
Ron Johnson of Colorado, who's as Trumpy as they come and who is a conspiracy theorist anyway, is the one who comes out and says it's an old photo. Right? Quite clearly, the establishment Republicans wanted to draw a line under all the speculation under this. They were under pressure from the governor of Kentucky, the Democratic governor of Kentucky, of all people, who said, look, where is he? By God. I mean, he's the senator from our state. They thought they could draw a line under this, and I don't think the Trumpists are going to let them get away with it. And this was going to be an ongoing story, which will be even, if the Republicans lose the majority in the Senate and the House, even if the Democrats do both houses, this battle within the Republican is going to continue. In fact, it's probably going to be exacerbated. And remember, it's going to be exacerbated going into 28 because Vance wants to be the Trumpist. Vance wants that Trumpist mantle, right? Whereas Rubio is establishment Republican. He was an establishment senator. Now he now's playing nice with Trump. He's like his hawkish Rubio. Let's go get Cuba. But so, it's kind of a watch this space thing, but it adds to the dysfunction that's already there in Congress. And Congress is because, if I asked you a question, by the way, how many pieces of significant legislation has Congress passed since January 2025?
No idea. Have they passed any?
The big, not so beautiful bill. Again,
yeah, of course,
a tax cut bill. The only major piece of legislation that I could name from the first term with Trump was December 2017, which was the tax cut. Same thing has gone around this time. And this has gotten so bad in terms of the fight between the Trumpists and the establishment Republicans. Remember 2 weeks ago, they passed a bipartisan housing bill. Bipartisan. Huge achievement. It has become law. But it's been a weird story. Remember that Trump came out and said, I'm not going to sign this bill because you have to pass the Save America Act. Now, this is the Election Manipulation Act under the guise of voter ID and all this crap that they're putting out there. It's an attempt to limit the number of people who can vote. I'm not going to sign. And this is a big Trumpist thing in the House. We want the Save America Act. Now, at the end of the day, the only thing that saved a Trumpist versus establishment showdown over this is Trump being Trump. There's a little known provision in the Constitution that if a president does not veto within 10 days, the bill becomes law. And that's what's happened. And it kind of quietly became law. So that's their second major piece of legislation they've gotten through. But they almost lost that one because of the Trumpist versus Republican fight.
And this is, of course, fantastic news for the Democrats. I mean, they're not literally, they don't need to do anything. Potentially, they can just waltz into both houses in November.
There's a couple of problems here. One is the Democrats. I'm not as bad as some people here, including the other major American commentator in Ireland. Oh, that's it. The Democrats are finished. They can't get their act together. Blah blah blah. I think there's a lot of good Democratic talent out there, but the Democratic National Committee is a bit of a basket case right now in terms of their messaging, and they've screwed up Maine. They absolutely screwed up, and every seat counts for the Senate this time around. And they had the oyster farmer, Graham Plattner, who was the insurgent progressive candidate. And lo and behold, not only is the guy possibly a white supremacist from his past, sexual assault charge allegations, and they just started to stack up on each other. And finally, last week, there was one too many. So he's withdrawn just before the deadline. So they've got to get a new candidate there. That was a winnable seat, and they may have messed that up. The other thing is that the Senate map was favorable to the Republicans. Everything had to break right for the Democrats to win it. And there was a possibility they could do it, but there's that setback as well. There's also the wild card, even before we talk about election manipulation, that let's assume you get a deal on Iran. Big if. But that would give it would be like an economic bump. It would take us back to where we were in February, but the Republicans would play it as an economic bump. Look, gas prices are coming down again, yada, yada, yada. So there's a lot that's in play for November. I think the reason why I don't play horse race politics as much is we've got so many issues of the system being at breaking point.
Yeah.
That it's not just a question of whether Democrats or Republicans take the seats. It's whether the Trumpists take the seats or whether it's establishment Republicans who take them. So this is a rolling story that we'll have to come back to.
And indeed, even I would say the establishment Democrats, because obviously they are now being faced down by the Zohran Mamdani Democrats. Because it turns out right now, like looking at, because again, I was reading about this, effectively Zohran Mamdani is the most powerful Democrat. Because the guy just could endorse anybody and people just absolutely march behind that person. And of course, they're all, according to American standards, they call themselves socialists.
If the American media and commentators could get their shit together, and sorry for using the term, to get their shit together and do this story justice, we would be in a much better position. Because to give you the riff off of this, wife comes up today, says, have you seen this? Right? And she says, Mamdani's come up with this scheme, which is Parents' Night. And and this is in all 5 boroughs of New York City, where they're setting up effectively centers for children from age 6 to 13 that are open between 4 and 8 p.m. The parents can drop the children off, say at 4 p.m., and go out on a date night. And I'm thinking, what a fucking brilliant idea. And it's like, and what's brilliant about it is it's like, well, that's communism. That's communism.
Oh,
that you would do that.
Nanny state.
Nanny state. Literally a nanny state. And it's like, dude, which parent out there would not want a night off, right? To go at it. And it's like, and it's that type of initiative, which is like, you get, and Mamdani, of course, look, we're not, Mamdani's Democratic Socialist. But the fact is are you a Democratic Socialist that can get things done? That's what it comes down to, right?
Exactly.
Now, you go to another place. I mentioned the governor of Kentucky, Andy Beshear. Andy Beshear is a centrist Democrat, right? But he's gotten stuff done in Kentucky. That's why his stock is on the rise, right? Gretchen Whitmer in Michigan, some people are going off Whitmer a bit, and I can understand why, but that's a 2-term governor in Michigan who's done pretty well, that you talk about it. Amy Klobuchar, the senator from Minnesota, I could just go off and tick the list of names here, right? And if the media was paying attention, they would stop doing this center versus progressive bullshit, right? In terms of, and I know that there's some activists that feed into that, because activists can be dumbasses as well, right? Stop activizing, if that's a real word, and do some practical politics here. Go for big tent politics, which is what you're talking about. But I'm going to give you a fundamental here. The centrist wing of the Democratic Party is in the middle of a huge shift. And the reason why it's in a huge shift is Clinton's gone. I know Hillary's still around, but gone. Biden, gone. And all that bullshit that the reason why the Democrats lost in 24 was because of the progressives, you can stick that up your backside and smoke it, because fundamental here is Joe Biden was a centrist candidate who screwed up the Democrats' chances that took place. Had the Democrats run on a big tent policy, even with all the difficulties that you're the incumbents, they had a shot in 24. Now, the Harris campaign was a nightmare on the economy. They screwed around on it. And so if you want to call Harris a progressive, I actually don't consider Harris a progressive, but if you want to call her a progressive, go ahead and do it. So you can say there's blame to go all around in the Democrats. The question always is, after 24, can you get your act together and you build, as all good movements do, from the local and the state level? Good local and state politics. What Mamdani is screw those labels, because you know what the Republicans are doing and the Trumpists, and that is they're red scaring this whole thing. They hope they can save their butts by red scaring that everyone in the Democratic Party is now a communist. What Mamdani was good local politics. That's what it is, right? Someone that comes out and says, we've got issues to deal with. Here's a platform to deal with the issues, and then starts to deliver on some of it. And I don't care if a Democrat is center, left. My first question is, are they getting things done? And that's where you go with it. Because let me give you one. If you think Bernie Sanders is a progressive, hell yeah. But the thing about Bernie Sanders, you talk to anyone about Bernie Sanders, he's one of the most effective senators there is out there. Because Sanders knows how to be a pragmatist. And the other thing is, watch this space. If I never make predictions, but if I was going to venture on something to keep an eye out for, it would be interesting to see if AOC is the next senator from New York. Finally pushing Chuck Schumer, part of that old centrist generation. Schumer finally gets pushed aside, right? Because AOC going into Senate, huge, man. She's good. She's really, really good. I mean, and by the way, just for those that are coming in, I would say same thing about the Republican Party. My gripe is not with all Republicans. My gripe is, can you get things done as a Republican? And my gripe with the Republican Party, as we've just discussed, is instead of looking at getting things done, you are in a position where you let the Trumpists run over you. All right? Well, it's time to stand up against that stuff if you're a Republican. And just, and for example, look up the problem solvers in the House. Bipartisan group, right? Which is the way it should be. The Republicans there are good folks. Can they get things done? No, they're overshadowed by the head cases, by the whack jobs that are out there.
And that kind of goes back again.
That's my rant.
As a reminder, again, I always like to remind people about our first ever episode together, where we talked about that now we're not living in this world. Oh, it's really all about being on the left, being on the right. It's irrelevant now. I mean, ideologically, it might have some kind of meaning, but economically, socially, politically, where we are today, it's all of us versus, let's call it for what it is, the Epstein class, potentially, isn't it? I mean, because I've seen some interesting polling, again, various sources, that the New Yorkers are actually pretty happy with Mamdani. The only people apparently who are not happy with Mamdani are the billionaires. So that means he's doing something right, isn't he?
Yeah, and the billionaires. But even the fact is that the whole God, you remember the scare story? All the rich people were going to leave New York City. They're all going to leave New York City. There may be some billionaires that are pissed off, but a lot of the business folks are because let's be honest with you, if you're talking about practical politics, business folks who may have to pay a bit more tax, but if they've got happier workers. If they've got contribution to their cost that their workers have to pay because you've got decent childcare, you've got decent transport, that is potentially a net win for that business. Yeah. That's good politics, folks. And,
as Richard Murphy likes to describe it, it's politics and economics of care. You take care of your people. It doesn't really matter what your party is. It's politics of care.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely right. So even if Elon Musk doesn't get it, we do. Yeah, screw it.
Yeah, but I think the question would be, and of course that probably could be for the next episodes, is the people. Because let's say once MAGA disappears and falls apart, what happens to the supporters? Because the supporters still believe in that crap. Like I said, I even received today, at the time of this record, because I received direct messages from people who say to me, Tim, you're wrong. You're wrong. Trump has got nothing to do with this, which is like, okay. What do you want me to do?
The loudest voices on social are usually a minority. The very nature of those who are motivated to comment and why they comment usually, and I have to tell my wife this because she gets upset here in Ireland and we've got our racists, we've got our bigots here in Ireland as well that come in. At the end of the day, what most people want, including people who are in the MAGA movement, and I'm convinced what most Reform Party voters want is, they want jobs, they want decent houses, they want decent health care. You get politicians that exploit the fact that they may not have jobs, they may not have the health care, they may not have the housing, and they exploit that by putting blame on others for that predicament. That was the secret of what Trump did in 2016 when you were only a few years removed from the great financial recession. That is the secret of what Farage has attempted to do when you're only a few years removed from the Brexit moment that he helped bring about. So my advice is when you engage with moderate, don't engage with them on that level of, why are you believing this? Why are you believing that? Why are you engage with it on terms of what is it you want? And if they come back and say, I want all the foreigners out of this country, ask them, say, would you rather have all the foreigners out? Is that your priority, or is your priority having a decent job? Is it your priority immigrants, or is it decent housing? Right? And try to engage on that level and say, look, okay, I agree with you that we need to have a better prospect for jobs. How are we going to go about and do it? My hope here is that that's what Andy Burnham does when he comes as prime minister. I hope everybody does it, but I hope Andy Burnham does it, because this is going to be the question that will immediately come up in the UK. You cannot just simply gloat about the fact that Farage may be collapsing because of his own personal baggage, and that's a polite term for it. You have to bring in the positive in terms of what's coming in there. If you get someone that comes in and trashes Muslims, and I'm saying this because my very good friend Hassan Patel, who writes for me on EA Worldview and who's been a friend for many, many years, he would come up and he's guided me on this. Ask that person, well, how many Muslims do you know? Do you know Muslims in your community? What do you know about Muslims? Right? When you get what GB News is whipping up right now, which is the fact that you have to put asylum seekers somewhere. You can't just simply leave them in the rain, for God's sake, or whatever. So when you get them whipping this up of, oh my God, there's asylum seekers that are being housed, and say, have you spoken with any of those asylum seekers? Have you actually spoken with any of them? And I'm saying this, by the way, as someone who lives only a mile from a hotel, which is filled with which is filled with asylum seekers, right? And they are part of our community. Some of them are at Park Run, where I run every weekend, right? Ask people if they have that contact. And I'll just leave you with this, because it's actually an interesting parallel. What finally began to break down the division in the Northern Ireland, which eventually led to the Good Friday Agreement, was when you could get people who were entrenched in their communities, and it just happened to be Protestant and Catholic in this case. And instead of saying, how could you say that as a Protestant? How could you say that as a Catholic? Right? When you said, have you sat down and talked together about community security? Have you stopped and talked about a way to decrease the violence? And what happened in Northern Ireland, which is fascinating, is that the big spur, the big final push in the talk for the Good Friday agreements, it wasn't actually the politicians from either side. Now, there were very good politicians involved in this, and I talk later, but it was actually the paramilitaries. That it was when the paramilitaries said, look, we're getting killed here. We're getting killed. We've gone through almost 30 years of this. And it's just whipping up hatred. And from both Catholic and Protestant paramilitary groups sat down. And that's what got Good Friday over the line, which is really, really interesting. Now, I know that's a little bit of an issue which is different from immigration, but it's still the same concept.
The same principle, yeah.
That you have to get people to establish the point of reference, which is there might be something here that is actually shared between you folks that you should be talking about. And that to take it all the way back is take it back to Mamdani. This is the reason why, part of me is quite happy they're doing this Red Scare thing, because I think it'll backfire. What Mamdani did, and he's not a savior. He's not an angel. He's just a guy. But what he did in the New York City is that you look at everything he talked about on issues, and what he said was, as New Yorkers,
yes,
do you want better transport? He didn't say it was a left issue, a right issue. He said, do you want better transport? He said, do you want grocery stores in your neighborhoods? And now he's saying, do you want a date night? And I think you can see me working on my Instagram reel for this week, right? It's like, do you want a date night? And it's like, man, I tell you what, if in Birmingham, which is where I was when I had my kids and so on, if I had like the mayor of Birmingham who had came up and said, we're going to use like local funds for data, I'd say, I'm willing to pay 10% more in council tax each year just to have that. That's just brilliant, right? You know, and off you roll with that. So there's a hopeful note to end with.
Indeed. Well, again, politics of care. Nice and simple.
Politics of care. There you go.
Nice
all right.
Simple. So
we persist, bro. We persist.
We persist. Of course, we'll persist. Absolutely. But with that, Scott, again, as always, thank you so much. And everybody, I hope you enjoyed this conversation again. And again, subscribe, help us grow, because it's this message that we have to push out to as many people as we possibly can, because the media ain't going to do it, right? Most of the media, at least anyway, they're not doing it. So,
all right. So we see you here. We'll see y'all on Scott Lucas Worldview as well. And I'll talk to you in 2 weeks.
Excellent. Take care, my friend. Please do me a big favor and make sure that you've subscribed on our YouTube channel and you like this video and you shared it to as many people as you possibly can to keep them informed and get them out of the clickbait shadows. But we can't do this on our own. We have to do this all together as a growing community that believes in truth. And we want to get rid of these clickbait, rage bait shenanigans that is proliferating the web and poisoning everything that is out there today. Now, if you can't afford it as well, please consider joining us as a paid member on retortmedia.com/support. This supports not just the podcast that we do here, but also the reporting that we do on Retort Media ecosystem, where we try to maximize the reach to as many people as we possibly can through information and real journalism that prioritizes facts over fiction. Now, with that, guys, thank you so much for all of your support. Much love, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace out.
You are listening to